landing crew, and welcome to today's video of 1 year after my autism diagnosis. If you are new, my name is Stephanie. I have 6 children. 4 of them are on the spectrum, which, as you can imagine, that is what led me last year to finally bite the bullet. Also, we lived in a state that was more accommodating towards adult evaluations for autism. I have a whole playlist of my process. I'm not going to talk about that. I've already been diagnosed for a year. I've already went over all of my test results and went in deep detail. I started the evaluation process, I want to say at the end of September, and then I finally got the diagnosis, I think around Christmas time. Like, it took a really long time for me to get the final results, but it's been a year, so I wanted to do a video and talk about it. Talk about like how my life's been. You guys have asked some amazing questions, so I'm basically going to use the questions as kind of a base for this video. I don't know, it's hard to put into words how I feel about it. I am going to do probably very little editing, so please bear with me as I kind of over talk, ramble, stumble over my words, but I want this to be as authentic as possible. So the diagnoses that I received were autism, PTSD, and anxiety, and then there was something other that I forget what the name of it was. It doesn't matter because I didn't meet enough of the criteria to even be diagnosed with it. So the 3 things that I was diagnosed with was anxiety, PTSD, which presents as ADHD because I was diagnosed with ADHD as a child, but it was really PTSD. Basically, from my understanding, what happens is when you go through complex PTSD, which is prolonged trauma, it creates issues in your brain chemistry, especially as a young child, and it will present like ADHD, but it's really PTSD, and it's very, very complicated, but that's kind of what I was diagnosed with. So Whitney Rose on Instagram asked, how are you doing after the diagnosis and how do you think it's helped? I definitely feel like it's helped me understand myself better, and I've said this a lot, but it's helped me give myself some grace. I have went my entire lifetime feeling like I was just defective. Everyone's gonna feel something else, but I didn't know I was on the spectrum. But I knew that I struggled to do even the basics of the basics that other people seem to just get on without a hitch. I always felt like there was just something wrong with me and I just needed to snap out of it. So I'm able to give myself more grace. I'm able to understand myself a lot better because I'm able to accept myself as is and give myself that grace. I've also been able to work on not masking as much and trying to be more myself, which is really hard. It's basically like you're untraining yourself of 35 years. For 34 years, I was masking and not realizing it. I was having meltdowns and not realizing it. I was struggling with executive functioning and not realizing that that's what it was. So now I've been able to have a lot more grace. Sarah asked, do you look back on your life and try and unpack where your traits have affected you? So I don't do this intentionally. Like, I don't just sit down and be like, oh, let's think about my autism traits. But there are times that my mind does wander, or one of the kids are doing something and I will remember back to my childhood. Specifically with Penelope, she reminds me a lot of myself when I was little. So that kind of makes me think like how different things were, like how I played, how I interacted with others. So yes and no. Beach asked, how did you get a diagnosis as an adult woman? I have a playlist, but I basically just found a doctor, found a clinic that was well known for evaluating adult women for autism. And that's really where you want to focus, is finding clinics or a doctor that is well known and well versed in how autism is going to look like in an adult that has probably been masking and hiding it for years without realizing that that's what they were doing. I imitate and read the room very, very well. But that's also a trauma response. That's why it's very common in young women who have also went through trauma as a child, because we had to react a certain way to survive. Griff asks, are you still pro ABA? I am pro the therapy that works for your child, that is not going to traumatize them or is not going to keep them from being their authentic selves. But we do have our kids in ABA therapy. Our 6-year-old is probably not going to be in it after the summer. Even when ABA therapy is done, I don't want to say in a correct way, because how our company does is like floor time, child-led play. Even when ABA therapy is done in a way that that is not traumatizing to the child, that doesn't mean it's going to be effective for the child either. It's Sinzo asked, do you have trouble making conversations? Yes, yes. I've done some scripting, so I'm able to kind of work on things, but I am definitely the person to just message you and tell you something about that is going on with me. And sometimes that's misconstrued as me just being all about me, 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 me. But if you message me about yourself, I will engage in that conversation. Sensational Sprout said, I got a diagnosis as an adult. Do you get judgment or disbelief from your family or friends? No, all of my friends close to me are like, yeah, this makes sense. Even some of my friends like joke now, like, Stephanie, your autism showing. So this is an interesting question. CJ asked, if you had a magic wand, when would you have liked to have been diagnosed in your life? This is hard because I don't think being diagnosed as a child would have been helpful given the environment I was in, but probably 18, like that would have been nice. Like before they diagnosed me with bipolar disorder and didn't actually try to find out exactly what was going on. 3 of each asked, what one piece of advice would you give to teen girls who are just being diagnosed? Give yourself grace, even when no one else will. That should be on a t-shirt. Hillbilly asked, do you struggle with change? Yes, I do. It's something that I really struggle with. Even if I know the change would help my life or make my life easier, it's really hard for me to deal with it. I've really struggled with this with our RBTs changing a lot. We've had a lot of therapist changes. That has been very hard, just not having the same people, and it's really thrown me off a little bit. They did literally like 7 different tests. They interviewed my mom, my husband, so they didn't do just one test. I know the ADOS was a test, the Vineland was one. There was a lot of tests that they did. It was a very, very in-depth, because not only were they trying to figure out if I had ADHD or if I was autistic, but they were also trying to figure out if I did have bipolar disorder, because you can be bipolar and autistic. In my case, I'm not, but you can have both. So they were trying to make sure that they were giving me the most accurate diagnoses. Alnura said, before they said you don't have ADHD, you mentioned that you do now. Was that reassessed? I want to address this. I still tell people I have ADHD. I'm like, oh, my ADHD is showing. I say it like that because it's kind of a conversation stopper and a room stopper to be like, oh, my PTSD is showing. It just is kind of awkward. It's just awkward. It's just awkward. And regardless what it's stemming from, whether it's ADHD or PTSD, it's presenting like ADHD. So it's still kind of valid, but I do not have an ADHD diagnosis. I feel like it's more socially acceptable to say you have ADHD than PTSD, because then some people like will ask you why you have, it just gets awkward. It just gets awkward. So there's a lot of questions like how I'm coping with the diagnosis. I want to be clear. I do not feel like the diagnosis was a bad thing. I don't feel like it's something that I've needed to cope from. It's not impacted my life in a negative way at all. If anything, it's helped me. It's not like I got autism at 34. I was diagnosed with it at 34. I was born autistic. So all of my life, I've had these experiences and I've had to do these things, not realizing that there was a name to it. I feel like I'm able to be more of my authentic self instead of trying to be what's going on around me or trying to be what other people want me to be as well. And that is why when parents come to me and say that they don't want their child diagnosed because they don't want them to be treated differently or feel like they're different, I tell them they're going to know they're different regardless. They don't need someone to tell them you have XYZ diagnosed to feel different. But having that diagnosis can help them understand themselves more and not give themselves such a hard time. Especially in the day and age in social media where I feel like a lot of things are glazed over and there's a certain image. I don't even think the image that people are putting out is their own image, but it already makes us feel insecure as it is, even when you are not neurodivergent. As far as like my traits of autism, I did like a 52-minute video going over all of that. But one of the questions is like, is there anything that you've realized now, like post-diagnosis? I feel like it's embedded in me. So that's why when people say like, it's a part of who we are, it is. One thing that I've had to really own, and it's been really hard, is how I hyper focus. I obsess, okay? I obsess over things. I'm like a dog with a bone and I can't let it go, and that's really hard for me. So like when someone gives me like a hate comment that really gets under my skin, it doesn't happen very often, but every now and then it does. I mean, it's just, I can't let go of it. So Colette Girl asks, is it worth having an actual diagnosis versus a self-diagnosis? If you have access to these resources, if you're able to, always go for the evaluation, even if it means having to wait a few years for it, versus self-diagnosing. I am not against self-diagnosing. You have to do some type of self-evaluation to be like, oh, I think I need to have this evaluation done. But autism overlaps with a lot of disorders, and that's just my opinion. That's kind of how I look at it. I definitely do think it's worth it, because even with the self-diagnosis, you will always wonder, like, are you really on the spectrum? There are a lot of disorders that overlap with autism, and it's important to make sure that you're being treated for the correct disorder or the correct diagnosis. Alessia asked, do you do any OT or PT or speech? No. I'm still able to do everything I need to do. So as an adult, I've gotten this far. I really don't need any services in that sense. Green JJ asked, did you suspect that either you or Lonnie had autism after your kids were diagnosed? This is a great question, Green JJ. There's been some comments here and there that I suddenly just decided to get myself diagnosed, that suddenly I'm just autistic now, and that's not true. Years and years ago, when I first started streaming on You Now, I remember specifically saying this, that I would not be surprised if I ended up getting an autism diagnosis if I ever was evaluated, because the older Noah got, the more I saw more of myself in him. It wasn't until we moved to a state that could give me that evaluation that I really was like, let's do this, because I was just so tired of feeling like a failure. A lot of people assume it would be Lonnie that's autistic. Even the doctor in Florida that evaluated the 3 boys, she said that too. She's like, if I had to think it was any of you guys, it would be your husband. I mask really, really, really well. Caitlin said, are you able to accommodate yourself better now that you know you're autistic? Yes, I feel like I can say, hey, please stop touching me, and I don't feel like I'm being rude. I try to say it as nicely as possible, but I have this habit of, like, if it's Lonnie, like if he's rubbing on me, like I let him do it until a point where I feel like I'm about to explode. And then I don't say it as nicely. So I've been working on that. I've definitely worked on my limit and trying to accommodate myself more. And because of that, I feel like it's really helped me come back to our channel, as I've obviously done a lot of self-work in the last year. Before, when I would edit, I would want everything to be perfect. For some reason, wanting to keep up this persona on this channel caused my OCD traits to magnify itself. It was kind of like a trauma response in a way. I would want everything to be perfect. And now I'm learning to let go and not try to achieve perfection. Nurturing neurodiversity, love her. She asked, what is your opinion on all the controversy and conflict with the online actual autistic community? All right, so I actually don't stay up with the online drama very well, but I do know, because they've come for me before. You're split up into 3 different groups, right? You're either an autism parent, or you're actually autistic, or you're an actually autistic parent. It's this weird space. It's a hard space. It's usually when you have the actual autistic community and the autism parents, usually the ones that are both like on the spectrum and parents to kids on the spectrum. They're usually a little bit more understanding because they do see it from both sides, but unfortunately sometimes they can come across abrasive as well, but not as much. It's usually the ones that are not parents that are actually autistic, or it's the ones that are neurotypical raising neurodivergent kids. I feel like there's a lot of grace that needs to be given to both sides. With autism, there's a lot of bluntness, and I feel like a lot of tone is lost on the internet, so you can really never know someone's intentions. And there's a lot of sarcasm, and if you don't understand sarcasm, I feel like there's a lot of social barriers, and I feel like this goes across the board on everything. When you are abrasive and you're not willing to have a conversation with them, and you're just telling them everything that they're doing wrong from your point of view, that leads them to not want to get advice. I've had many parents to autism tell me this, like it makes them not want to ask questions in groups, not want to learn. They're just stuck to their devices, just trying to figure it out. And I don't think that's a good way either, right? I feel like we should all be learning from each other. So I feel like both sides need to give. I also feel like the autistic parents with autism need to also understand that the actual autistic community is just trying to help them not go through the same trauma that they've went through. And that sometimes they will come across more abrasive than they're probably meaning. And I feel like there's a way to give from both sides. Definitely some tension. So Emily asked a bunch of great questions. I'd be curious to hear an update on the part about you being undiagnosed with bipolar as part of the autism diagnosis process. Was it an adjustment for you to switch from thinking you were bipolar to now autism instead? Yes. So there were moments that I was trained to believe that anytime I had any upswings, that it was part of mania or hypomania. And so there were moments in the last year that I've had to be like, you're not manic, Stephanie. this is just part of your hyper focusing. That was the most common one that I was told that was mania, was when I would hyper focus or obsess about something, because it could keep me up literally all hours of the night. Going off of the old bipolar medications was beneficial for me. I mean, it really didn't change anything because it really didn't change me. And that was part of the problem, was when they were first starting, they would just put me on Depakote, and they just kept increasing the dosage because it wasn't working, because it wasn't bipolar disorder. Once a doctor she put me on Prozac and lithium at the same time, and the Prozac would help me when I was feeling down. It would kind of help like even me out, but I was on like this really, really low dosage. And so we never thought that it would just be the Prozac, and they would have never tried that. It's believed that if you give a bipolar patient Prozac, it can actually make them manic. So since I struggled with mania more than depression, then that was kind of a fear of theirs. She also asked if I thought them being on them in the past was bad for me. Absolutely. If you don't have imbalanced brain chemistry and you're taking medications to balance that brain chemistry, the only times that I had serious mental health traits and signs and all of that was when I was on antipsychotics. That was scary and crazy. And then once they took me off of them, I was better. So I definitely think that there was some harm to it. That is also when my weight issue started as well, because Depakote made me gain a lot of weight and actually triggered eating disorder issues that I hadn't had since I was a teenager. So there was definitely a lot involved. Someone had commented the other day and asked if I'm ever angry about it. Yes, I'm not angry that my parents didn't see the signs. I was masking. I get that. I'm not even angry that no one saw it before then, but when I was 25 and I was struggling, they should have taken the time to really go over everything that I was going through. It's so silly. Like, it's so silly. Like, I can't fathom it. I can't fathom having a new patient walk in and within 10 minutes, giving them antipsychotics, mood stabilizer, anxiety medications, giving them a bipolar diagnosis one, just sending them on their way and being like, here, go to group therapy. No, like, I needed intensive trauma therapy. I needed to be on anxiety meds, yes, but we also needed to figure out exactly what was going on. Faith said, for me, my diagnosis led to me having a lot of, oh, that's why I done that. I have that all the time. Lonnie and I went out to eat earlier and we were talking about it. Like, I am the type of person that always orders the exact same thing at the restaurant. Like, I have been eating a chicken critter salad from Texas Roadhouse for like 10 years, literally. Or I will get in these moods where I only want the same food. Like, I will want Arby's literally all day, every day, like lunch, dinner, constantly. And I never realized that it was an autism thing, but apparently it is. Nathan asked, do your autistic kids think it's cool to have an autistic mother? Lex, Liam, and Nellie just aren't old enough to really understand the concept that, one, they have autism, and two, I do. But Noah does, and he thinks it's really cool. We will have conversations about autism. We will talk about what that means, being different and things like that. So it's always nice when we can have those conversations, because I hope that he goes away from it knowing that he's special and awesome as is. Now, Lex will sometimes catch me stimming because I am being more open and free with it. I'm not trying to hide it as much. I'm trying to be more comfortable with me. And he will ask me why I do that, because he doesn't stim as much and his isn't as noticeable. Like, he just chews on things, or he just does movements with his fingers. Mine is a little bit more noticeable. We do get to have that conversation on why I stim, why Nellie stems. Mika asked, since there's a genetic component with you and your children, could there be a chance that one of your parents could be undiagnosed or misdiagnosed? Yes. My mom and I have had this conversation. There is a chance that she's on the spectrum, but I don't foresee her being able to get an autism diagnosis in Florida if she ever moved to Colorado. Mama, if you're watching this, if you ever move to Colorado. My mom also has the issue where her bones break very easily, and she's always had this problem, not just as she's gotten older. How she talks about how easy her bones break is how easy my bones break. So there probably is some type of like genetic component. So Tony asked 2 questions. She's a rebel. She didn't listen to the one. Her first question is, what have you discovered about your autistic self over the past year that you previously thought was just normal for everyone or down to a different diagnosis? It would probably be executive functioning. And I don't know why this didn't click with me before, because this is of course something that my autistic kids struggle with. I didn't have a reason. I just thought that I was, again, defective, and that was executive functioning, like taking care of myself, taking care of the house, being organized, and being able to handle things. The best way for me to explain it is I thrive in an organized, clean environment, but I just can't get there. I just can't get there. I've never used my autism diagnosis over the past year as an excuse. I don't throw it out there. This is the difference. It's not like I've stopped trying to take care of myself or I've stopped trying to take care of my house. But now, if I'm going through a really rough time and I'm not able to organize myself to do it, I don't beat myself up. I'm like, Stephanie, it's fine. Tomorrow's a new day, or this is when you'll have some free time to catch everything up. It is very hard. And I will be honest, running a business is also hard. Like, you have to be very organized, and I do get things done and I'm proud of myself for that, but it's not easy. Just the daily functions of life is not easy. You have to work so much harder than everyone else just to do half of what they do. So Teresha asks, are there any negatives that came from my diagnosis? And that was a common question from other people too. I feel like the only thing negative that came from it is it's given people who don't like me online on social media a different leverage to use against me. So before it was something else, right? Now it's, oh, she's autistic, or just trying to like disprove my diagnosis, even though I've literally shown my reports on vlogs and videos. So I think that's the only thing, is it just gives them something else, like some other fuel to use against me. But I'm kind of okay with it too, because I am being able to help others. I want to empower other individuals to take a hold of their life and their mental health and who they are, and own that, and own it like a boss. Give yourself some grace too. If that means that other people are just going to use it against me just to be ugly, then that's on them, not on me. That says way more about them. Miriam asked if I felt I was more in touch with myself since being diagnosed. And yes, I feel like I've really gotten to know like real Stephanie, not the Stephanie I try to pretend to be. Because that's the thing about masking, is it's not like you're just masking when you're in a crowd. You're also masking with yourself, and you're spending your entire life trying to program yourself to be like everyone else, and it gets very exhausting. And to do that, you have to believe the story too. That's how adults go so long without being diagnosed, because it's not that just like they're pretending, and that's what people forget about the mask. They think it's something that we put on and take off. No, it's something that usually at a very young age we put on and would modify to fit people around us. Sammy asks, how does compare having autism to kids having autism? Having kids is just different. It's different struggles. Like, I'm new to some things in autism. Nellie starting to self-harm. I'm new to that. Liam having such communication issues, I'm new to that. So there's a lot that I'm new to and I'm learning that I just have no experience with. So, but other than that, it's a lot of the similar things. Like, yes, Nellie's stems are different than mine, but she does them for the same reason. I think the hardest thing that I've encountered, and the most frustrating thing, and this is not a question, this is just me sharing. I think it's frustrating because before I was diagnosed and I would share my opinion with the autism community, I was disregarded because I was an autism parent and not actually autistic. And now that I'm actually autistic, it seems to not matter, and it doesn't hold weight, because if I don't have the same views as the collective of the autism community, suddenly it's like, well, you were diagnosed as an adult, so it doesn't matter. To me, that's such a harmful way of thinking. I've been autistic my entire life. Like, my experiences aren't different just because I didn't have a diagnosis next to it. When my kids are going through ABA therapy and we're going through programs, or they're expected to do XYZ, I think, how would have I felt as a girl if I was being put through that? Is that really helpful? I was like this before the diagnosis. So the diagnosis did not change this. I've always been like, how would I feel if I was in their shoes? Like, how would this feel if I couldn't have words? I knew what I wanted to say, but I couldn't say it. And so it's very hurtful when I have a diagnosis now. I am part of the actual autistic community, but what I say doesn't count because I didn't get diagnosed young enough. Bianca asked if having an autism diagnosis helps me be a parent to autism. I feel me being autistic helped me be a better parent, and that was before the diagnosis. And it's so important to remember that a diagnosis is just a label that is given to something that your children or yourself have had all along. I was always such a good advocate and understanding so much because I could relate to it even though I didn't have a name for it, if that makes sense. I feel like I was able to be more patient and I was able to be more accommodating to how they felt and what they needed because I knew what that felt like. So a lot of the questions are questions that can already be answered on the videos. If you are new, I encourage you to go into the playlist. I will link it in the description just to go over. There's like 6 or 7 videos, but I went into a depth. I documented my entire process of getting evaluated, so I feel like that will be really helpful. I'm also starting to post on TikTok, our landing crew. I've decided to kind of brace that just because it would be easy to just answer questions very quickly and maybe help other families in a different outlet. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope I covered everything. If not, we do stream either on TikTok at our landing crew, or you can follow us on You Now, our landing crew. Follow us for streaming. So we will see you guys later.
We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Good tidings we